My parents skipped my son's first birthday to vacation with my sister's kids, calling them their only bundles of joy. So I stopped paying their mortgage. Now they're homeless, and suddenly remember they have a grandson. Hello Reddit I+ here. My name is Christopher Hale, I'm 34 years old, and I work as a financial consultant for a mid-sized investment firm in Oregon. I've been married to my wife, Madeline, for 6 years, and we have a wonderful little boy named Oliver, who just turned 1. That first birthday was supposed to be one of those moments you treasure forever. Balloons, cake smeared all over his face, family singing off-key in the background. Instead, it became the day I finally saw my parents for who they really were, and the day I decided I was done carrying their burdens. I grew up the youngest of 2 children. My older sister, Rachel, is 3 years older than me, and for as long as I can remember, she was the star of the family. Every moment of my childhood seemed to revolve around her. Her piano recitals, her school plays, her endless parade of sports teams. My parents never missed a single event. They'd bring flowers, make photo albums, and brag to anyone who would listen about how talented and special Rachel was. Me, I was the background character in my own family story. When I made the honor roll year after year, my parents would nod distractedly, maybe say, "Good job, son," and then immediately ask Rachel how her volleyball practice went. When I earned a partial scholarship to a competitive university, they congratulated me briefly, before spending an hour dissecting Rachel's decision to take a semester off to figure herself out. That was the pattern my entire life. Rachel got excuses, attention, and money. I got silence, or at best, indifference. The weddings, the favoritism carried into adulthood. When Rachel married her husband Mark, my parents went all out. They spent $45,000 on her wedding, a lavish ballroom event with ice sculptures, a string quartet, and a guest list of nearly 300. They borrowed heavily to pull it off, but they insisted their daughter deserved a fairy tale day. 2 years later, when Madeline and I got married, my parents offered us $1,500 and told us we should be grateful since they were still paying off Rachel's big day. We had a small but lovely ceremony in a botanical garden with about 60 guests. It was heartfelt and perfect in its own way, but deep down, I couldn't ignore the stark difference. My parents left the reception before the cake cutting, saying they were tired. About 6 years ago, my parents hit a financial wall. My father had worked in logistics management, but he was laid off when his company downsized. He was 59 at the time and struggled to find another job he considered worthy of him. My mother's hours as a school secretary had been cut, and suddenly, they were 3 months behind on their mortgage. Foreclosure was looming. Rachel and Mark were no help. They had 2 young kids, Sophie and Lucas, and were constantly living paycheck to paycheck. Rachel hadn't worked in years, saying motherhood was too demanding, and Mark's retail management job barely kept their lights on. So my parents turned to me. I'll never forget the look on my father's face when he broke down crying, begging me to help. He said they'd lose the only home I'd ever known, the house filled with every childhood memory. Madeline and I had been careful with money. We lived below our means, saved aggressively, and were planning to buy our first home. Helping them would delay those dreams, but after talking it over, I agreed. I paid $9,000 to bring their mortgage current, and then made them a deal. I would take over their monthly mortgage payments, $1,250 per month, but they had to downsize their lifestyle, get jobs, any jobs, and take responsibility. They promised they would. They lied. For 5 years, I poured money into that house. More than $85,000 in mortgage payments, plus property taxes and repairs. Meanwhile, my parents did nothing to change their behavior. My dad took a part-time job at a home improvement store, but quit after a few months because he said the work was beneath him. My mom refused to look for additional hours. They kept going out to eat, taking short trips, and, this was the kicker, spoiling Rachel's kids with expensive toys and weekend getaways. Whenever I suggested they tighten their belts, my father snapped that I was trying to control them. And all the while, Rachel remained the golden child. Holidays, always spent at her house, babysitting. They practically lived at her place. Social media, post after post of Sophie and Lucas, always referred to as the light of our lives. When I told them Madeline was pregnant, their reaction was flat. My mom muttered, "That's nice," before immediately pivoting to talk about Lucas starting preschool. When Oliver was born, my parents came to the hospital. They stayed 20 minutes, one photo, a couple of awkward smiles, and then they left, to go to Rachel's house. Over the next year, they visited Oliver maybe half a dozen times. Never for more than an hour. They didn't babysit, didn't offer help, and barely acknowledged the updates or photos we sent. Meanwhile, their social media feeds overflowed with Sophie and Lucas, showered in captions about how blessed they were to have such beautiful grandchildren. Madeline noticed the imbalance and told me I needed to stop funding their lifestyle if they couldn't even pretend to care about our son, but I kept hoping they'd change. When Oliver's first birthday came around, we planned a sweet little party at our house. Balloons, cake, family, and close friends. I called my parents weeks in advance, stressing how important it was to us that they attend. My mom was vague. "We'll see. We might have something going on." When I pressed, she said she'd let me know. A week before the party, my father called and flatly told me they weren't coming. "It's just a first birthday. He won't even remember it," he said. I asked what they were doing instead. After a pause, he admitted they were going away with Rachel's family. A weekend at a lake cabin. That hit me harder than I can describe. They were choosing to vacation with Rachel's kids instead of celebrating Oliver's very first birthday. The day of the party, our house was full of laughter. Madeline's family showed up. Our friends came with gifts. Oliver had cake in his hair and smiles for everyone. But there was a hole where my parents should have been. That night, after cleaning up, I checked social media. My mother had posted an entire album of lake cabin photos. The caption? "Weekend getaway with our precious Sophie and Lucas. Our only bundles of joy. So grateful for these beautiful grandchildren who light up our lives." My hands shook as I read it. Only bundles of joy, as if my son didn't exist. I showed Madeline, and she looked at me with one word: enough. That night, I opened my laptop and totaled up every dime I had paid for my parents' mortgage, taxes, and repairs. Over $92,000. $92,000 I could have put toward a house for my own family. $92,000 I could have invested in Oliver's future. $92,000 I sacrificed for parents who chose to erase my child. The next morning, I called the bank and stopped every automatic payment. 2 months later, the foreclosure notices started arriving at my parents' door. By the 4th month, they were evicted. The house was gone. And now, they're calling me constantly, leaving voicemails, saying they never thought I'd go this far, that they're living out of motels, sometimes staying with acquaintances, and they just need me to step up for family. But family, in their eyes, has always meant Rachel, her kids, her happiness. For the first time in my life, I'm stepping up for mine. For Madeline. For Oliver. And my parents? They made their choice. They chose their only bundles of joy. When I cut off the mortgage payments and the house slipped away, I thought the message was clear. I thought, maybe naively, that my parents would reflect on how deeply they'd failed me, on how they'd chosen my sister's children while ignoring mine, and maybe, just maybe, they'd try to change. Instead, they doubled down. It started with phone calls. Dozens of them. At first, I ignored them. Then the voicemails started filling my inbox. "Chris, you can't really be serious about this. You're punishing us over one birthday party? Be reasonable. You can't just leave us homeless. We're your parents. We raised you. Don't forget who paid for your food and clothes all those years. Rachel and Mark don't have any money. We need you. Please call back Madeline, listen to a few with me." Every single one of them avoided the truth, that they had treated Oliver like he didn't matter. Instead, they painted me as selfish, ungrateful, cruel. When I didn't respond, my mother began sending letters, handwritten, emotional, filled with guilt-tripping lines like, "Someday Oliver will learn how heartless his father was to his own family." Madeline tore one of them in half after reading it. "They don't deserve another ounce of your attention," she said. But it wasn't that easy. Because no matter how much anger I felt, they were still my parents. A part of me still craved the approval they'd never given me, and they knew it. A few weeks later, Rachel called me. That alone was unusual. She almost never reached out unless she needed something. Her tone was sugary sweet. "Chris, I think you should reconsider helping Mom and Dad. The kids really miss their grandparents. Sophie keeps asking why Grandma and Grandpa can't come around anymore. It's breaking their hearts." I clenched my jaw. Funny. Sophie and Lucas seem to have had their grandparents exclusively for years. My son didn't even get a mention on their social media. Where was their concern for Oliver's heart? Rachel sighed dramatically. "You're always making everything about you. Can't you just move past it? They're old. They made mistakes, but they don't deserve to be out on the street." I laughed bitterly. "Rachel, they're not on the street because of me. They're there because they chose to waste money while I paid their bills. They chose vacations with you over their own grandson." "I'm done," she snapped. "You're jealous of me. You always have been," and hung up. That was the last time Rachel and I spoke. 2 weeks later, there was a knock at our door. Madeline opened it and froze. My parents stood there, looking ragged and older than I'd ever seen them. My father's clothes were wrinkled, his face unshaven. My mother's eyes were red from crying. "We just wanted to see Oliver." my mother said, her voice trembling. Please, Chris. He's our grandson Oliver, who was toddling around the living room, looked up curiously. He didn't know them. He'd seen them maybe half a dozen times in his life, never long enough to build recognition. Madeline stepped in front of them. You had a year to see him. You chose not to. You don't get to show up now because you need something. My father bristled. Don't talk to us like that. We're family. We belong here. I finally stood and faced them. No, you don't. Not anymore. You lost the right when you called another woman's children your only bundles of joy. My mother burst into tears. My father growled that I was ungrateful, that I'd regret turning my back on them. Then they left. Oliver, oblivious, went back to stacking blocks, and for the first time I realized he wasn't losing anything. They had never been present enough in his life for their absence to matter. After that, the smear campaign began. Family friends called, saying my parents had told them I'd abandoned them in their time of need. A cousin sent me screenshots of a Facebook post my mother wrote, painting me as a heartless son who chose money over family. I considered defending myself publicly, writing out the truth, posting the screenshots of her calling Rachel's kids her only grandchildren, laying bare the years of favoritism and neglect. But Madeline stopped me. Why waste energy proving yourself to people who were never in your corner? She asked. Focus on us, on Oliver, on our family. She was right. For once I didn't fight to win their approval. I let them talk. I let them paint me as the villain. Because in my own home, in my own family, I knew the truth. 6 months after cutting my parents off, Madeline and I bought our first house. A cozy 2-story with a big backyard for Oliver to play in. For the first time, I wasn't funneling money into a bottomless pit for people who didn't care. Instead, every dollar I spent was for my wife and my son. We took Oliver to the zoo. We started a college savings account for him. We went on a small family vacation, our first in years, without guilt hanging over us. One night after Oliver had gone to bed, Madeline and I sat on the porch with glasses of wine. She touched my hand and said softly, I'm proud of you. You broke the cycle. And I realized she was right. For years, I had been living in the shadow of Rachel's golden child status, desperately trying to earn scraps of love from people who would never give it. Now, I was free. A year after I stopped paying their mortgage, I received one final letter from my mother. It wasn't angry. It wasn't manipulative. It was just empty. She wrote that she and my father were living in a small rented apartment now, barely scraping by. She wrote that Rachel rarely visited because she was too busy, and that the grandkids she once worshipped hardly called. The last line read, I wish we had treated you better, Chris, but it's too late now, isn't it? I folded the letter and tucked it away in a drawer. I didn't respond, because yes, it was too late. The little boy sleeping in the next room, my son, would grow up never needing their approval, never craving love from people who withheld it. He would grow up knowing that his father put him first, and that, more than anything, was worth the cost of walking away.